in that starting zone. Another thing we should talk about is Soar, the Dracthea racial. The ability to soar above the skies and be a dragon. It is by far the most fun spell they've introduced in years. It is incredible. It's so good. And you get nowhere near enough times to do it.
It's happening again. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Holla ballers indeed. So Mr. Chris is on holiday for a couple of weeks following PreachCon 2022, which just took place in Manchester. A week-long event of insanity and shenanigans with a lot of you guys flying over to Manchester. It was incredible. It was amazing. But I did say I would check in weekly with you guys on how they were doing with the Dragonflight Alpha, as they have updated another piece of the pie. And there's another one actually due out tomorrow. I'm recording this on Monday after I finally got back into the office after seeing all of you home, traveling back to the other sides of the world, and it's time to dig into what happened last week. We did get time to check out this Dragonflight Alpha. I have seen that Soar has been nerfed. I saw that while I was dealing with PreachCon. I haven't tried it yet. That's in the current build, so there'll probably be a video in the next day or so covering that. I'm going to get it done before it swaps over again tomorrow, so stay tuned. But the build I looked at was actually the very first starter zone. This is where our first venture to the Dragon Isles will be. They did some updates to the Mage talent tree in particular, and I kind of want to talk about talent trees as a whole. I messed around with Paladin and Mage, which were the focus of this slice, but more importantly, I got a first glimpse of the endgame. And I think this is really important because many people brought up or keep coming to ask, like, how are you feeling about Dragonflight so far? Is it changing your mind on how things were in the past? Has it reached those stages which could be enticing you back? And the answer is simple, guys. I have no idea what the end game looks like yet, and I'm still waiting for that pessimistic part of my body that is going to show us something that's like, oh, that kind of sucks. I'm still there. I can't get out of that mindset just yet. I hope it doesn't exist, but so far we've looked at leveling stuff, yeah? And that's the stuff that will kind of, for most of us, be consumed in the first week, first couple of weeks, and all this stuff will have been slurped up and done with. But that's what the focus is right now. We're not really looking at the end game, although this did show us a little bit of what might be awaiting in the end game. And I am going to use that word that constantly seems to come around my lips, especially during World of Warcraft's alphas and betas, is potential. Potential, potential, potential. So let's get into it. First of all, let's talk about talent trees. So talent trees are, of course, returning in Dragonflight, and yeah, there's a lot of fuss about the talent trees. A lot of people have been craving for these things to come back since Mr. Pandaria when they went away. Personally, yes, they're fun to fill out and choose paths, but they're a real mixed bag of hodgepodge. Some stuff is good, some stuff is bad. At the moment, it very much depends on if you got lucky, and they all need some work in some way, shape, or form. Like, the Mage talent trees are pretty trash. They're really bad. You're just building a character you already have. Now, I don't actually, and this might surprise some of you, I don't necessarily disagree with this approach. Talent trees are returning, and they kind of need to do baby steps with the community a little bit. There'll be a lot of people playing World of Warcraft who never knew a world of talent trees. They only ever played since Mr. Pandaria with the standard setups of the 3 in a row. So for them, going back to talent trees is going to be a big, big deal. So I'm kind of okay for the most part that the talent trees that we're getting now for existing classes, obviously Evoker lives in its own world, are kind of just getting you to rebuild a character that you already know. That's kind of all right for a first reintroduction to this system. It's like everything feels kind of comfortable. There's a few new things depending on the classes and specs, but for the most part, you're kind of understanding if you've played that character before or you've been a Frost Mage for the last 7 or 8 years, where you kind of want to, you know what your Frozen Orb could kind of do and what it should do when you press it off. And you've been playing it for that amount of time, so you're kind of rebuilding your character. Like I said, there are a couple of new things thrown in there, but for the most part, you're really just rebuilding your character. My ultimate thought process on this is there's going to be a lot of math involved. There always is with World of Warcraft. And I kind of think that there'll be 4 or 5, sometimes maybe 5 or 6 builds that are posted by the top players, the specialists in those classes and specs who can go into the endless detail on certain trees, and they will say, these are kind of the talent setups you want to run. People will save them as loadouts, and the mystique and wonder for the huge majority of player base of talent trees will kind of disappear rather quickly. Now, I don't say that to be pessimistic. It's just that, look, guys, I've had over a decade of experience dealing with the WoW player base and stuff like this. You'd be amazed how many people just never respect their characters. They just don't do it. A lot of people just grab a build at the start of the expansion. They go and ask a streamer, or they check a website or whatever. Someone they trust to give them a build which should be fine, and then they stick with that forever. And that's kind of it. That's what they get used to play. That's their comfort zone. So while Blizzard is giving those options of having multiple talent setups to go along with their characters, so you can have this build and this build, and for the most part that works. My negative criticism towards the talent trees, like I said with the mages, is if you can't get certain things without going down like very specific routes, even though they do synergize with other things, and it's about creating these cross pathways as you move down the trees that would really open up those characters. So a great example of that would be the Shaman talent trees. I played some Shaman this week. It was so amazingly fun, and their talent tree is great because you kind of want everything, and that's the point of a talent tree, is you want all these things. All these things are very, very cool, and you're having to figure out, okay, well, what am I dropping for this? Because, yeah, I would like an enhancement Shaman with Thunderstorm that's able to do all this fire damage, but then mix in some lightning damage on this side. And you're kind of picking and choosing and going, oh, that could be cool. And then if the scenario changes, oh, maybe I can go a different way, actually. Some of the talent trees, though, like the mage one, it's like, well, I kind of just pick whatever I want at the end, and I just kind of have to go there. I will say we don't have the full talent tree spending potential yet, because we haven't had, or at least so far, I haven't played a character that can reach the level cap, which means there's all those points that are missing yet, which could give some different reactions to them. So overall, that's my thoughts on talent trees. Don't want to dive too deep into those. That's the work for the absolute class specialists who are going to spend, you know, the next 3 or 4 months going through the Dragonflight Alpha, looking specifically at mages, specifically arcane, specifically elemental, whatever it might be for their class and their chosen flavor. That's going to be those things. I do want to talk a little bit about the brand new dungeon, which, wow, this thing made Maw of Souls look like an eternity. I was gobsmacked at this dungeon. It's so short. It's weird. Like, genuinely weird. My first run in there was actually kind of awful because for whatever reason, even during alphas, and this has historically been a big, big problem, at least in my eyes, because you're not testing very much, is people use the dungeon still to speed level, and you don't get to enjoy the dungeon. So my first run in there was currently a prop paladin bug where they had like permanent wings and permanent guardian, the ancient kings. So they had permanent wings, permanent shield wall, and they could just pull the entire dungeon while people were dying left and right from passive damage, and just pull the whole place without any risk of dying, doing all the damage, and you just basically ran through a corridor, and then it finished. But what it did highlight is that we finished that dungeon in like, my first run in there was like 8 minutes on heroic, something really bizarre like that. It was crazy. I was like, wait a minute, there's not even any trash between the second boss and the last boss. You do one corridor, one loop of a ring, and that's the end of the dungeon. It's done. It's way faster than Maw of Souls. And I have to say, the live reaction to this from the people who were watching me do it was really positive. People were like, this is great. This is just in, out, done. I'm on the fence a little bit. Yeah, it's very, very short. That's a nice change of pace, I guess, from a lot of the other dungeons, which kind of had a standard format. I can see the appeal of it, but it'll also be extremely efficient, perhaps, to get something like we have seen the new crafting system, which has certain rewards from the certain ends of dungeons, is whether we'll drift into that Maw of Souls Azerite power scenario again, where it's like it's the default one to go to. Like if you're not just grinding this one dungeon out, you're kind of being stupid. So I'll have to see whether they're going to be like one drop only or something like that, to not just make this the be all and end all of dungeons, because it's not super interesting, at least until I get to do it on Mythic, when we'll get to see a little bit more of the teeth that this dungeon has. I will say I went back in and tanked it so I could take a look around and get more of a feel for the format, because like I said, the first dungeon just got sped through. What I found is like, yeah, there's not too much more to it. Like, even if you're kind of taking your time, you smash through this dungeon very, very quickly. Has some interesting mechanics going on for it. I really like the first boss, and I really enjoyed the last boss. But overall, it's surprising that they've gone this way. I'm still on the fence, and I want to see the Mythic version of it before I come back down to it. Let's talk about the first zone. So one thing that a lot of people are pushing me for, especially after Final Fantasy XIV's recent playthrough, is how's the story. And so far, the story is looking really good. I had this to say about the Drakthea starting zone. It was very, very good. Some great characters set up there, that new, fresh blood that can come into the WoW story and really give it some life and some muster. exactly the same situation happening in this first zone as well. I was really impressed with how they managed to handle many of the Dragonflights and bringing, without spoiling things, characters of old and characters that I think some very lore-invested World of Warcraft players have probably thought got forgot about, or they just, you know, what is this character doing? It should be involved. Coming back into the story in a good, meaningful, solid way, and then making their appearance felt, making their presence felt in this war of the Dragonflights, or the solutions to the Dragonflights. Really like what they've done with Alexstrasza's model. Didn't make it overly sexualized in any way. It's just gorgeous. It's really, really nice. And visiting all these areas, especially all the peaks and areas that they've got for the dragons, was fantastic. Really cool. I also very much enjoyed the pacing of unlocking actual Dragonflight. So everybody's getting Dragonflight once you go to the Dragon Isles, but they have a good setup before that point. It's not too quick. It's not like you get there and get it. What I will say is I really hoped that there was... my guess would have been that they took some inspiration from Avatar. Not The Last Airbender, but the movies where they get their flying mounts, essentially, where they have to connect and tame one. I would have put good money that Blizzard would have gone down that route, and that's how you get your first dragon. As it is right now, it's just a quest. Oh, you're here? You should probably learn to fly a dragon. Go and talk to Billy, and Billy tells you how to fly a dragon, and now you fly a dragon. I was really hoping for something there to get a connection with it, maybe name the mounts, because you do get to change the colors. That's in there now, the mount customization. All right. It's a good way of speccing them out, I suppose, adding talons, fins, and there's going to be a lot more cosmetics in the games to really flesh out those dragons. I think it's a little disappointing. I think there's a certain expectation, because it is going to be account-wide once you've got it, so it should be a one-and-done thing, is some sort of connection to your first dragon. Some way of capturing it, stalking it, mounting it, getting on it, and that's your dragon. Maybe even choosing from a field of them or something along those lines. But as it is right now, it's just a quest. But you get it, in terms of the pacing, though, you get it in a decent place. You really do. It's about an hour average gameplay, maybe a little longer, depending on your leveling speed, until you actually get dragon flying, and then it unlocks the cool stuff. So let's go to the end game and the really fun stuff. So first of all, the dragon flying itself is, if you've done Soaring, which many of you won't have yet, but it's very fun, super good. But as with all things that have some sort of skill element to it, the early levels of dragon flying and the first few things you'll do don't teach you much about the potential that you can actually get going with these things. That then came for me in the form of the dragon riding races, which was easily the most fun thing I did over the couple of days that we played this Dragonflight Alpha series. I spent hours doing this. It was so good. So the Dragonflight races were a big concern of mine when Blizzard was announcing Dragonflight. I really hope they do something good with this system. It's not just an alternative mount system, but the racing is very good, and especially that they've mixed it with the normal mode where you can get rewards. There's a time for it, so you have a set time to beat if you want the gold reward, but then they give you the option of the advanced races, and the advanced races don't give you any helping hands. So in the normal mode races, you'll pick up orbs and things that allow you to use the dragon cooldowns instantly. It'll just shoot you forward, right? You'll fly through them and it'll just shoot you forward to maintain pace, and you can beat, with gold, all of the normal mode races without having to do anything particularly special. I beat them very quickly. However, when you go to the advanced, you don't get any of those. Instead, you have to use the dragon's natural abilities, and it will then give you charges of those natural abilities. So instead of having the boost pockets that you have in the normal mode, you have to really think about how you use your dragon's talent system, which is now in the game, and its special abilities in order to beat this thing. And that gives so many cool elements as to how you should traverse the obstacles, what abilities should you use where and when in order to conserve them for later periods in the races. And it was so enjoyable. So enjoyable. I mean, I wish they would allow us to make custom ones that players can make. That would be fantastic if there was some interaction like that. I don't think there will be, but you could see the potential here in... This is a really advanced system, like dragon riding and getting it right and maintaining certainly what I call blue speed, because that's when you got the blue hue coming off your dragon, which meant you were going as fast as possible. Maintaining that, controlling the levels and altitudes of the dragon in order to maintain that through certain swoops and swooshes, and then you got to go uphill, which is going to kill your speed, so how are you going to counter that? Managing it when you grab the extra resources so you can chain your dragon going forward. Really good. And although... I will say this, we looked for not a great period of time, But in order to utilize the dragon riding talent system, there are these glyphs. It shows you an example of them in game. It's like, hey, if you see these things, fly through them. So they should be up in the sky. They'll be in buried areas where you should fly through these glyphs, and that'll give you a talent point for your dragon. I looked in what I thought were the obvious locations, but unfortunately my character bugged out and I didn't get to look any further. But I didn't see any of those, so I did my advanced dragon riding courses without any talents whatsoever. But what I can say is, if you're not great with controlling this dragon, by gaining the talents, you will make life easier for yourself in order to attain gold, complete your achievements, things like that. I think that's a fair trade, because after the Soar change, and again, people were telling me about this, and the response is a lot of people were a little worried about how fast dragon riding is, because it was very, very quick. And it still is. They kept dragon riding good, but they've changed Soar for the Dracthea. And a little concerned that maybe it's too quick for them. I've seen a lot of suggestions about toggling it down, but until I play it myself, I don't want to comment on that too much. What I can say is I very much enjoyed the speed. The levels are enormous, and this first zone is huge. It is built with that speed in mind. They have designed the zone knowing that once you have dragon riding, and especially if you get even average at using it, you can traverse the whole zone. We have flown from the Sargeras sword all the way to Orgrimmar in one foul swoop, right? Well, Chris has. I tried it and hit a skybox. But Chris has made it all the way from there. You can go very far, very, very fast, and it's very, very fun. So I hope they don't feel the need to keep slowing it down, because it would take a lot out of the dragon ride racing, which so far has been the absolute best thing I've seen. Let's talk about those things that I was talking about with potential and endgame. So, as you're probably aware, they're not going to have a mandatory, at least so far, mandatory grind in order to get your power. So, obviously in Shadowlands you had things like Renown. In previous expansions it was Azerite power, Artifact power, these kind of grinds that you needed to keep on top of week after week, day after day, in order to maintain your character's current power level in one form or another. That's not going to be in Dragonflight Alpha, at least so far. It's one of the reasons I'm here checking it out. But what they are doing is putting these individual reputation companies in each of the zone with their own unique abilities and things to explore. Now, this has a lot of potential. So the two, well, it's one, but they're kind of combined but separated. Activities that I found that were in this zone that I very much kind of like, okay, this could be fun. One was rock climbing, and the other one was basically Pokemon Snap. And this has huge, huge potential. Like, huge, huge potential. This is your gravy train. If they can nail this, this is really fun. At the moment, it's bare bones. Now, my gut instinct, or I guess my historical instinct, is this will just be kind of what it is, and I shouldn't expect more. Which is a real shame, because, again, this can go really far. Let's explain each one. So, the rock climbing, I did every quest available to me that they would give me, and basically, the rock climbing is there are certain outcrops and certain walls, certain ledges in the zone that you can climb if you got the right equipment with you. And this is equipment that will upgrade as you carry on leveling up through the reputation. Now, when I say rock climbing, they gave you interesting abilities like hang to regenerate your stamina, help your friend, things like that. Didn't have to use any of those things, and I assume the system is still very much in bare bones early days yet. But it looks like there's going to be some group activity going with it. And essentially, you just have to climb to various precipices and ledges and learn to rock climb. Maybe you have to save somebody, and then you get to rappel back down the mountain. And that was kind of cool. That was really fun, because I can already picture, it's like, okay, so are there going to be really hard rock challenges that you need friends with, you need certain levels with, you need certain rock climbing equipment with, and that should get you very good rewards? Perhaps you're going to access some sort of very difficult to reach ledge where there may be a mini boss or something like that drops great resources, where a group of you can go rock climbing and access this instanced area that you can't get to just by dragon riding into it or something. You have to be doing the rock climbing phase in order to get up there, but you have to help each other. You have to pick your points to stop and regenerate. Perhaps there's safety points. All these ideas started flooding in as like, this is where this system could go. Then you have the Pokemon Snap stuff, where you get to go down like river rafting and things like that, and you have to take pictures of certain creatures. You're documenting the wildlife of the Dragon Isles, and you are very much, if you've ever played Pokemon Snap, you're looking for the creatures to do very specific things and getting a picture of it. And it's done very simply. It's a little shame it doesn't use the selfie cam system, because that would have actually come in really good here. But then I started to think, it's like, okay, so you've got this system where currently the basic dailies are go down to this riverbank, either go on the raft or stand around here and wait for these creatures to do certain things, like feed or grab a fish out of the water and get a picture of it. That's great as the setup. But you can easily predict that this system could then mix in all these other things. Is tracking beasts, pictures of footsteps. Perhaps you're taking a picture of something and a bigger creature appears. And this creature lives in the rocks, or it lives under here. And now you need to talk to the other, or work with the other reputations in order to figure out where this secret beast may lie. Do we have to find a certain amount of food for it? A certain type of food? Do we have to study that to figure that out? And you can see all these systems could all mix together to be a really fun little endgame activity to people without doing much more than is already in the alpha right now. Like, this stuff is happening right now in the alpha, and it'd be very simple to add this stuff in, a few phased instances that you could go into, hunting down rare beasts, things like that. A whole Monster Hunter World type accessory that is just done through these reputation systems of, we need the photographs, you need to track what these beasts are doing, you need to follow them, you need to see where the wildlife has changed or something along those lines in order to bring this out. And I was really looking that this system could be fantastic and not just a series of simple dailies. Now, my gut feeling is I've completely legendary ringed this. If you're not sure what I mean by that, is the legendary ring in WoD had utmost theories on what would be at the end of it, and ultimately it was a ring that just one person got to use in a raid, and it shared everybody else's. But we were hoping for all sorts of wonderful, wonderful things that would come from that. And it may just, and it probably is going to end up just being a bunch of dailies. But who knows? That was my experience with this week's alpha, is first glimpse of the end game and looking kind of positive with that. Kind of positive. So I've got 2 more tests to do. I've got to do tests tomorrow, and then there'll be another test immediately after, along with our FF14 stuff that's coming out. All right. So we're fully in recovery mode. Got some con flu, but we'll be back with you next couple of days. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.